Hello guys and welcome back to this channel. I'm your host Edikan Obot and this is Isaac News. As you guys already know on this channel, our job here is to bring you up to speed with amazing development happening in our dear country Nigeria. And today we'll be looking at Nigeria's trade balance for the first quarter of 2023. Now if you're in Nigeria, you already know that in December of 2022 the cashless policy was actually initiated, and it led to a cash crunch in society, and it worsened in January and February of 2023. We saw goods rot, we saw people lose their market, we saw a lot of carnage, and it was really bad for business. I personally was supporting the policy but did not really support its implementation. Okay, I don't think it was properly implemented. There were certainly agendas behind it. One of it was to bring some sanity into the electoral process, which it achieved, but the economy had to pay dearly for it. Now, I for one feared that because of the way the cashless policy was being implemented, that we were going to record a very terrible trade balance for the first quarter of 2023. So the National Bureau of Statistics had actually released a report for trade in first quarter 2023, and it's not so terrible as I expected. In fact, to my surprise, we're actually recording a trade surplus of 927.2 billion, very close to a trillion naira. Now, if you compare with the corresponding quarter of 2022, we were in a deficit. In the first quarter of 2022, we had a trade deficit of about 300 billion naira. Now, first quarter 2023, with cash crunch, we have a trade surplus that is close to a trillion naira. This is huge. Now, this shows how much the economy is trying its best to diversify itself, and it shows how resilient and tough the Nigerian economy is and the Nigerian people are, without also undermining the hardship that people felt in the first quarter of this year. So let's get right into the statistics as we further dissect how the quarter went. So Nigeria recorded a foreign trade of about 12.05 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2023. So if you compare the import and export volume in terms of in figures, in terms of monetary expenditure, it's going to hit 12.05 trillion naira. And unfortunately, this represents a 17% decrease from the corresponding quarter in 2022. What we spent in 2022 was about 14 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2022. But then Nigeria's export slightly increased, by 2% to 6.49 trillion. So our export volume or export figures for Q1 2023 is 6.49 trillion. And that is about 2.8% increase. We're later going to see the figures for Q1 of 2022, what our export figures were. While our import figures stood at 5.56 trillion naira Q1 2023, where crude oil import or petroleum import, not crude oil, petroleum import accounted for 79.4% of total import in Q1 of 2023. Now, this is amazing to show that we don't have a very huge export bill. If 79% of our export is PMS, this is good news for the country in the long run, not right now. Why am I saying that? Right now, Dangote is already online, and Port Harcourt refinery, 210,000 barrels per day refinery, is coming online on by December 2023. So by next year, Nigeria is going to be a net exporter of refined petroleum products, meaning that by next year, about 79% of our importation to this country will no longer cease to be. That's huge. So let's just say 80% of the total importation will cease to exist in this country by next year. So we are forever going to have a trade surplus. In fact, a trade balance that will be, in fact, the trade import will become a shadow of export in this country in the long run, because we're going to be exporting crude oil and we're going to be exporting refined petroleum products, and we're going to stop importing 80% of petroleum imports we are currently importing into this country right now. Now, away from that, so the country recorded a positive trade balance. So trade balance means you're going to take your export revenue, your import revenue, and you're going to minus your import from your export. So when you minus 6.49, pardon me, when you minus 5.56 trillion from 6.49 trillion, you're going to get 927.2 billion naira. That is our trade surplus. That's our, that's the trade surplus. That's our, what you may call profit, our net, balance from, the trades in Q1 of 2023. Now, let us give us some figures and some breakdown. Now, breakdown of report shows that import in Q1 of 2023 is 5.56 trillion and import in Q4 2022 5.36 trillion. So what happened? We imported more in Q1 of 2023 than we imported in Q4 of 2022. Now you may say, why is that? Okay, I don't also know, but typically in the closing quarter of a year, trade volumes typically decreases, be it import or export. And when I find out the reason why, I'm going to share with you guys on this platform. But it's very typical. Okay, the trade volumes you're going to see in Q2. In fact, Q2 and Q3 are usually the most active, quarters in an economic year in any country. Q4 is typically the slowest. Q1 would be the second slowest. Okay, then Q2 and Q3 will be very active. So, but then in Q1 of 2022, we had an import figure of 7.49 trillion. That's huge. That's wild. We spent 7.49 trillion to import in Q1 of 2022, whereas in Q1 2023 we spent 5.56 trillion. So, we actually reduced our importation by close to 2 trillion naira in between first quarter 2022 and first quarter 2023, and that is huge, and that deserves a lot of accolade and applause. Now, on the other hand, Nigeria's export slightly increased by 2% when you compare it with the quarter in review. So in Q1 2023, we had 6.49 trillion, whereas in Q1 2022, we had 6.39 trillion. So we recorded a slight increase with about 2% increase in export volumes in between Q1 2023 and Q1 2022. So the overall outlook of the economy in Q1 of 2023 was positive, as we as a nation recorded a trade surplus of 927.2 billion naira, even in the midst of the cash crunch. Now, there's a lot of positives in the economy right now, as we are beginning to see the economy pick up, even with the coming up of this refinery and the removal of fuel subsidy. You're going to see our imports reduce and our exports increase consequently. Now, we are waiting for reports from the National Bureau of Statistics for Q2 of 2023, even as we begin to phase out of Q2 and begin to look into entering Q3 2023. So this is where we're going to end for this video. It was a very nice one, seeing that the economy is actually strong and resilient, which means that we have the capacity to bear shocks that come on the economy. So we're going to wrap it up here right now. Thank you for sticking with us thus far. Don't to check up more news concerning this on your own on different social media platforms and on the internet. Check Nairametrics, This Day Live, Premium Times, and some other newspaper outlets. I still remain your host, Edikan Obut. Do well to follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter at our official handle, Edikan Obut. And until we see again, Godspeed.